Museum curator Emil Bruch has made an incredible discovery: a tomb containing more than 40 mummies. But one sarcophagus, that of the great pharaoh Ramses I, is strangely empty.
They compared the teeth and skull of this unknown mummy to other known royal mummies.
The similarities are striking. Deep in the vaults of the world's greatest institutions lie extraordinary relics and chilling secrets waiting to be revealed.
These are the mysteries at the museum.
The Field Museum. Included in this vast collection of natural wonders is a mysterious item that came from deep underground.
The artifact is made of a green material. It's 16 inches tall and 4 inches wide. It portrays a stoic figure with its arms placed over its chest.
This statue is linked to a lost treasure that turned up in the most unexpected of places.
This story recalls a missing mummy, a freak show, and a centuries-long mystery.
In the 1800s, the exploration of Egypt and the discovery of ancient artifacts ignited a craze that swept Western culture. Archaeologists unearthed tombs filled with age-old treasures and mummified remains in the sacred area known as the Valley of the Kings.
Everyone seemed to have what's called Egyptomania. They were digging up tomb after tomb after tomb.
Perhaps the greatest find to date was made in 1881 by a German named Emil Bruch.
Emil Bruch was a curator at the Cairo Museum and a well-known Egyptologist.
Bruch uncovers the entrance to a crypt hidden deep in the desert sands. The massive tomb is filled with priceless ancient relics. But an even more astonishing find is yet to come.
Bruch discovers 40 mummies.
According to the hieroglyphs on the sarcophagi, the remains are former kings and queens of the Nile.
This was definitely a huge discovery.
Inside the massive coffins, each regal mummy is embalmed with their arms crossed over their chest. This pose was meant to emulate the ruler of the underworld, the god Osiris, represented in this statue on display at the Field Museum in Chicago, Illinois. But strangely, one sarcophagus is empty, the one belonging to the great pharaoh, Ramses I. Born in the 14th century BC, Ramses I was the founding pharaoh of one of the most powerful dynasties in Egypt.
Ramses was a brilliant leader. Despite lacking royal blood, he rose from a life in the military to earn the pharaoh's throne.
The great ruler founded a dynasty that expanded Egypt's territory in the east and in the south. It produced some of the most important leaders in ancient Egyptian history, including his grandson, Ramses II. But while the remains of his offspring are safe, it seems as though the legendary pharaoh has vanished into thin air.
All the rest of the mummies were there. It made no sense.
With no obvious answer, Bruch removes the rest of the contents of the tomb. Over time, his priceless discoveries go on display in museums around the world. But the strange disappearance of Ramses I remains one of Egypt's most enduring mysteries for more than a century. So where has the mummy gone?
It's 1881 in Egypt. Museum curator Emil Bruch has made an incredible discovery: a tomb containing more than 40 mummies. But one sarcophagus, that of the great pharaoh Ramses I, is strangely empty. So where is the missing mummy?
1998, Ontario, Canada. Gail Gibson is an archaeologist who has spent countless hours working on excavations in Egypt. But Gibson's greatest find is about to be made much closer to home. One day, she pays a visit to the city of Niagara Falls, stopping by at a quirky sideshow museum.
There was a 2-headed calf and a 5-headed pig. So you can imagine the style of what this museum was about.
But as Gibson walks through the displays of oddities and mutations, one item in particular catches her trained eye: a mummy, reportedly from ancient Egypt.
In her career, she had analyzed hundreds of mummies, and this was certainly one of the best she had ever seen.
Almost anyone could be mummified, from nobles to the wealthy to state officials. But this one has an unusual feature that sets it apart.
It had the arms crossed over the chest.
Gibson knows that only the rulers of Egypt were embalmed this way.
She thought all the royal mummies that were known were in Egypt. So how could there be a royal mummy at a tourist sideshow in Niagara Falls, Canada?
Gibson believes she has stumbled onto something big.
She was very excited. If this mummy was a pharaoh, this would be a monumental discovery. She couldn't let this priceless relic rot in a sideshow.
So the archaeologist persuades Georgia's Emory University, known for its Egyptian collection, to buy the mummy and accompanying artifacts for $2 million. At the university, researchers start by radiocarbon dating the mummy.
They found that the mummy was at least 3,000 years old.
Then, they X-rayed the ancient remains.
They compared the teeth and skull of this unknown mummy to other known royal mummies.
The similarities are striking.
This unidentified mummy looked like a very famous king of Egypt, Ramses II, or Ramses the Great.
The mystery mummy must be related. So the team reaches a shocking conclusion.
This was probably the mummy of Ramses I.
But the question remains, how did this great pharaoh end up in a dusty sideshow in Canada? Perhaps the most likely answer is that tomb raiders broke into the Egyptian burial chamber sometime in the years before Bruges' discovery. The stolen contents were sold to the highest bidder on the black market. The mummy eventually made its way to the Sideshow Museum in 1860.
Gail Gibson solved a centuries-old mystery.
And in 2003, Ramses' remains are sent to the Luxor Museum on the banks of the Nile River.
After almost a century and a half of exile, the mummy of Ramses I found himself home in Egypt.
Today, this statue of Osiris sits on display at the Field Museum in Chicago. It recalls an intrepid Egyptologist who unwrapped the mystery of a missing mummy.